Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Software Engineer K here. Now, today is March 3rd, and we've just received a letter of intent to file for a motion to dismiss by Grad Garlinghouse with regards to the Ripple XRP lawsuit. So there's actually some great stuff in here. This has made me a lot more positive about the lawsuit, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to summarize some of the few key points that he's made. A lot of it we already knew. But the timing of this, I don't believe is a coincidence, because yesterday we heard Gary Gensler's stance. It was his nomination hearing, and very recently we also had the initial hearing for Ripple versus the SEC. We heard the SEC's point of view. Some of the arguments weren't the strongest, and Brad Garlinghouse has literally picked it apart here, and he's filing for a motion to dismiss with Judge Torres. Now, what I believe will happen is all of these points here, they will be taken on board by Gary Gensler as well. And I believe even he has to acknowledge the strength of some of the points that he's made. And I believe there is a lot more likelihood of forming a settlement with Gensler as opposed to the current acting chair of the SEC. So without further ado, we'll just get into it. So some of the main points that I want to touch upon are where the SEC, what Brad Garlinghouse has stated is that the SEC fails to recognize the economic realities of the defendant's transactions in XRP, and he talks about how the SEC is trying to pin XRP as a security through the Howey test. And the Howey test, one of the core prongs that they need to prove is that there was an investment contract between Ripple and the investors, and we know that the majority of XRP was sold on the secondary market, i.e. exchanges. So it's going to be very, very hard to prove that there was an investment contract between Ripple and someone who purchased XRP on an exchange. I personally did not go and approach Ripple and buy XRP directly through them with Brad Garlinghouse, willingly knowing that it was an investment contract that he was forming with myself, and that was not the case. I just bought it off who knows who on an exchange, and then when I sold my XRP, someone else probably bought it off me. So there was no investment contract there. So again, this was a very strong point that was made, and one that I believe will help disprove the Howey test. And then the next point was, again, he points out that FinCEN, they stated themselves that XRP is a virtual currency. So again, this is another strong point. And if we just carry on going, one of the main points that Brad Garlinghouse points out is that the SEC is trying to somehow prove that he willingly knew that he was going into an investment contract with people investing into XRP, and he willingly did it whilst knowing it was a security. But none of that holds very strongly, because after the 30-month investigation, he states here, after the famous investigation and after production of more than 200,000 pages from defendants, the best that the SEC could do was that Brad Garlinghouse was generally aware of the risk that some digital assets could possibly be deemed security. So after over 2 years and 200,000 pages, there was still nothing concrete, and that for me is not a very promising sign if I was on the SEC side. And you can't have an affirmative judgment just based off of assumptions. Now, if we just scroll down, so he's just stated that these allegations, which only show the efforts of a prudent executive trying to get it right, do not cut it. So they fail to adequately allege that Brad Garlinghouse was negligent and that he willingly knew that XRP was a security and he was going into an investment contract with these investors. But that was not the case. So if we just have a look here, the SEC has suggested that it would be sufficient to show merely that Mr. Brad Garlinghouse knew that Ripple's offers and sales of XRP were not registered by the SEC, but his theory fails to distinguish between substantially assisting legal conduct as opposed to improper conduct, and would essentially transform aiding and abetting into a strict liability offense. So overall, see that the SEC's stance isn't very strong. They can't prove that he willingly was distributing XRP as a security and was going into these investment contracts. the best that he can do was that he kind of knew that it might have been a security, but that was at the time. And if we go back to what Gary Gensler has stated in the past, he said that although something could start off as a security, an asset can evolve into a currency. And the SEC just fails to prove that people outside of the US, and this is a huge one, people outside the US who purchased XRP, they were not purchasing a security because the countries that they are based in, these investors, they have classified XRP as a currency. So they were purchasing a currency, whereas the SEC's jurisdiction applies only to US investors. Now, this goes to the other point where he has talked about it's actually very, very difficult to prove how much XRP was sold to US investors. So they're trying to say that Mr. Garlinghouse has sold over 357 million of his XRP for approximately $159 million. Now, Mr. Brad Garlinghouse has already stated that 90% of liquidity of XRP comes from outside of the US. So if we were to apply and extrapolate that same figure here, really this 357 million or $159 million worth of an alleged distribution of a security suddenly becomes barely $16 million, which is actually not very much for Ripple, and not actually, I would say, not worth the amount of effort that it's going to cost the SEC. If anything, it's more likely that they'd settle if they acknowledge that if they are going to try and pin Ripple for distributing an unregistered security, they have to also acknowledge that the XRP that they sold, that was then resold on the secondary market, was sold to mostly people that do not reside in the US. So that's just a key point where I'm not quite sure how the SEC is going to get around it, but we'll have to see. So lastly, he finishes off, the SEC cannot save its pleadings by arguing that Mr. Garlinghouse offers of sales are domestic simply because he or XRP purchasers, the location identity of which Mr. Garlinghouse was unaware, may have been physically present in the US at the time of transactions. So again, like how is Brad Garlinghouse supposed to know the location of every single person who bought XRP? It just does not make sense. And here we go, when we signed it with Matthew C. Solomon. So this 5-page document, I'll include the link of this in the description below, but so have a look at it for yourself. But I, after reading this, feel a lot more positive. I feel that this is going to help bolster XRP's prices in the short term, as we await further confirmation, and we'll see just how it goes. But that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully XRP does recover, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.